Today we're speaking with Angela Dawson, the CEO and founder of 40 Acre Co-op. Hi, how are you doing? Can you tell us why you started, or a little bit about 40 Acres and how you got started?
Sure. So the 40 Acre Cooperative is an agricultural cooperative focused on equity for Black, Indigenous, and other historically marginalized farmers. It was founded, well, basically, first I should say that we have about 34 active farm business members in our cooperative. About half of them are in the state of Minnesota, but we also have a collective of 7 states and 2 tribal territories that are represented in our membership. We have a waiting list of about 200 to 350 people that we haven't processed yet through our system because we do have some requirements for active membership in the cooperative. But I basically started the co-op because of my own experiences with accessing farming resources when I decided to become a full-time farmer um, over 3 years ago. And my own experiences with the USDA and other local and national resources that were that are supposed to be set up to help support agriculture in the United States. And so I had some unique experiences. I thought they were unique, but they ended up not being so unique in terms of the lack of opportunities and the sort of in the stigmas associated with Black farmers and just the lack of resources. And so I started the cooperative after I had a personal experience with the USDA, and I started asking other farmers, and I started looking more closely into the relationship between Black farmers, particularly, and the USDA. And I opened up a can of worms, quite frankly.
So this is an agricultural cooperative, right?
Yes.
And I read that on your website that this is the first national cooperative. And so an agricultural cooperative, if you could explain a little bit about us, how that works. I think a lot of people don't necessarily know how, a cooperative works. Maybe they've heard of a worker owner cooperative, or maybe they know of a consumer cooperative, but tell us a little bit more about that. Thanks.
Sure. So I've been studying the cooperative model for quite a long time. I was used to be a member of ACE, the Association of Cooperative Educators. I went to a couple of those sessions. I've been for a long time very and just enthralled with the cooperative model, seeing how it has built communities. I'll say in Minnesota, where I'm from, it has the highest co-ops per capita here. Well, we have a very strong cooperative community in general, where we have agricultural cooperatives, we have food cooperatives, consumer cooperatives, and we have worker cooperatives here, very strong in this region. And so, as a woman of color here, born and raised in this area, I've always seen how the co-op model has been used successfully in white communities, and I've even benefited. I've worked at some of these co-ops over the years and have just always had my own personal desire to see my community build something like this and and benefit from it. And so, not knowing that I would have to be at the center of a storm, so to speak, when it comes to the agricultural cooperative. An agricultural cooperative is a farmer owned, it's a producer owned, and it has specific benefits that other co-op models don't have. But particularly for us, it allowed us to find ways to raise resources and funding to support our farm enterprises without having to go through the USDA.
It's kind of sad that you have to say USDA with such a bad taste in your mouth, being that it's a government entity that is supposed to be there to support people. But we see time and time again that historically they've left out, you know, Black and other minority groups out of that equation of help. I laugh,
Ab-
but I'm not laughing, if that helps.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, what I found after doing my own research and really, having a personal experience that was quite devastating to me at the time, is that there was a name known for traditional Black farmers who had been sort of that Pickford versus Glickman legacy. And I didn't know this, but the USDA has long been considered the last great plantation in the executive branch by Black farmers because of the way that their agents are allowed to interact with Black farmers.
I have never heard that term, but and it's powerful, and I can completely see that. Did you, in trying to create this co-op and form this co-op, and especially on the national level, whereas typically agricultural cooperatives are done on the local level, was it important that you receive legal support as you uh, created this entity?
Legal support is so important in the development of in the foundational success of any cooperative. And it has been a challenge because this is also a really unique area of practice for us. But we did use the resources of a law firm who actually is experienced in establishing these kinds of cooperatives. The lawyer that helped us with our founding documents also helped found some of the more successful agricultural cooperatives in the country. But I will say, just from that that experience, and just as a woman of color, I feel like agricultural cooperatives have a unique benefit in our community. But I also feel like Black farmers also have a uniqueness that's layered on top of that. And um, our lack of capacity in this area of cooperative development really was a painful exercise for me. So even though I had legal support, it still didn't exactly apply to the community that I was working in, right? Because this kind of cooperative hasn't been done in this kind of way in this community that I could really have found an exact you know predecessor to research. And so there were quite a few growing pains because of that. And we're still continuing to learn how to improve every day, really.
And if you don't mind me asking, how, what, was the person that you were working with, like what race were they?
It was an older white man.
Mhm.
So very technically skilled in the laws related to this kind of business structure, and also like was very foundational even in some of the legal language that was written to establish this business structure. But the whole cultural side was a big miss, quite frankly.
What do you think would have been different had you received representational legal representation, or say representative legal representation?
I think about that sometimes because I'm in Minnesota, and I've been actually thinking about a way to create a legal community that would support not only 40 Acre Cooperative, but our members, because some of the things that the co op goes through, our individual members all have like small examples and as a microcosm of how these things and build up. And the co-op's whole mission is to put a strong national voice to some of these issues so that we can advocate for some change that will allow us to compete on a more equitable level in the marketplace. And so I feel like the 40 Acre Co-op has a powerful story and a powerful mission that connects with people. But I think that our power would have been even more unfathomable. I think we would have gotten more financial resources in a shorter amount of time had we had the proper representational legal support. And I feel like we could have avoided some pitfalls that definitely slowed our growth if we would have had gotten the right legal support in time.
So you mentioned fundraising right now. What was that process like? Did you how long ago was this fundraising? Was it over several years? Was it a short time? Because you said we would have probably raised more money in a shorter time. So can you walk us through that a little bit more?
Yeah, so here's the problem with fundraising for Black farmers in general, and the co-op still deals with this. We need a proper vetting process, right? So because of our scope and probably our publicity, we get a lot of different kinds of offers for investment and money, but we don't really always have the capacity to vet who are proper um, um, investors for our venture at different phases. And so I think at the beginning, we were so excited about our growth and about our messaging connecting with people that we probably included some people that we shouldn't have. And and that we found that everybody was not really aligned with the cooperative development message. They were just really just looking for some sort of quick buck or quick investment, or some people still want to extract value, extract knowledge, extract intellectual and other financial assets. And so I wish I would have had a better screening process to weed those people out. I still think that, especially because not only are we Black farmers, but we're also working in a growing lucrative industry in hemp and cannabis. And so we I so I stopped the growth, honestly, to tell you the truth. I stopped taking on members. I stopped taking in money because I felt like we needed to have some more capacity in that area built up before we engaged in any more kind of contracts that might not be in our best interest.
Wow. What would you say working um, in a cooperative? I guess, we're talking about investors right now. So let's talk a little bit more about members and what the cooperative provides for members besides just, like, I guess, how specifically does that look like in terms of um, benefiting the members, monetary position? I guess in you have a video where you mentioned wanting to move the needle on the average income of Black farmers. Would you say that your model is working?
I'd say for the most part, yes. Um, the members, and that's where we also had to figure out a little bit more about how to properly vet members, right? Because farmers are all at different levels of their expertise, skill level, and ability to engage with our network. But I'll definitely say the farmers that have followed us through when we started our training program, we've done this 12-week training program, and last year we did it with Charlotte's Web industry executives that actually sort of coached and mentored our farmer members on different aspects of growing hemp for the professional CBD market. And then we had our own interpersonal sessions where we provided coaching on our grower members. We provide access to our cultivar. We developed our own unique genetic cultivar of hemp that we know and that we got familiar with. We know how it performs. We know that it won't test hot, that it passes all of the industry standards, and it also is a really good producing plant for the farmer. So members get access to those genetics, and then, excuse me, and then we also so we do the training, the access to genetics, and then we do the network. We also provide access to our network of growers and the on the supply chain end of the supply chain. Now I will say when members do join, they get access to we have a grow guide that people get access to. And then our grow manager here that 40 Acre hired is a leading cannabis grower in the country and has been successfully operating cannabis farms on the West Coast for a long time. So members get access to some of our grow managers' knowledge, and then our own technical assistance we provide with. Some members have gotten grants through us, and then some members have gotten access to processing equipment. through us. So it does depend individually on their area where they're located and what the processing needs are and how large of a hemp farming community they have in their what they call hub. That they're located in, but we would prefer, what our preferences is and what we hope to be able to grow into is pretty much a vertically integrated provider of resources for farmers at every stage of the growth cycle.
But right now, it sounds like you guys are operating more, or each farmer is still operating a little bit on a more of an individual basis.
Yeah, and that's how farmers are. I don't know if with Black farmers in particular, first of all, they don't trust anybody. And, they're never just going to wholesale take on someone's whole entire operation or model. They're going to test it out and put their toes in the water and take it back maybe and then put it back in. So yeah, but we have some of those. We have some toe testers, but then I have some farmers that have really followed our program step by step. Especially there's a couple of young mothers in the tribal nations in northern Minnesota that have been following our program step by step and has really experienced tremendous growth both in their crops and their products and in their business and in their influence in their community. So I think, and for me, just understanding the history of Black people, the trauma associated with growing and farming and theft and broken promises, and those kinds of things that we have to understand before we engage in any kind of business contractual agreement. That's one of the things that I learned is that there's a little bit of a grace period that's needed, to either build trust, to build the relationship, or to just kind of find out if there's alignment. And so we do offer some, conversations and some mini trainings. But at some point in time, the co-op has expenses. We really rely on the expertise of national experts. We're doing spend a lot of time trying to change policies for Black farmers with the USDA. And it's not cheap to farm. It's an expensive venture. So we do as much as we can with no cost, but because we really haven't been properly funded by outside sources yet, we still have to be able to be sustainable and charge for some of those resources.
Right. So when you were fundraising, I'm really curious, was this a lot of donation-based fundraising, or was this actual, investment type investment crowdfunding? Or I say, I'm assuming you were using crowdfunding. I'm a little bit curious as to what instruments you used.
For the most part, some crowdfunding because, Minnesota, where we're located, has experienced a tremendous amount of change during the last couple of years since the co-op started. And especially because Minnesota has quite significant disparities along racial lines. And because during the time that we launched, it was the time that George Floyd also was killed in Minnesota. So there was a lot of crowdfunding. Crowdfunding was like the thing here, right? Because everything was around, dealing with these horrible racial disparities that exist here in Minnesota. So really, by default, the cooperative has receives a combination of amount of money, and that's another thing that we had to grow in. So we did have to sort of spin off a nonprofit section of the cooperative because there are parts of our work that are definitely not profit producing, right? Like, bringing on Black farmers, working with trauma, dealing with the relationship building parts don't really lend well to a high profit yield, right, in business. And so we found that and even though some people consider themselves socially responsible investors, um, I think that people don't really understand the depth of the trauma that Black farmers have experienced within this country and how it's impacted our business and our ability to operate on par with competitors. And so that's why we did have to find a better vetting system, both for our membership and for our investors, to make sure that we're coming up with a better match for, the realities of working with our farmer groups, and also the realities of, operating within the industry resources that we have. And I think that, it's a I felt like it was a big ask for an attorney, a white, old 65-year-old white man, to try to grasp all of that. And so I don't fault him completely for not being able to meet all of those needs. It's a big ask for anyone, quite frankly. And so but I feel like we do have to get better at finding ways to plug into the right support early on so that we can, I mean, some of these things we just don't need to be repeating anymore.
Yeah, I think I guess, when I was in law school, there was a course that I took, and I feel like it resonated with me in the sense of when I hear you talking about sort of like these additional costs of doing business that relate from, that come from the trauma and the you know historical and continued discrimination, that we would refer to that as like the black tax. So it's just the additional amount of operational costs that we have to take on that people don't recognize.
Absolutely. And and how to incorporate that in a business model, right? That people can understand. And so that is kind of some of the adjustments that we've made this year in understanding, what is related to, the cooperative operating supply chain and the market, and then what is the work of doing business with members and the community, and all of the repair, right, that needs to be done from the historical oppression, honestly. And I think some people may have some fantasy ideas about, socially disadvantaged farmers and getting them back into equity, an equitable position. But, there's a lot of unwritten work that we're finding that needs to be done that hasn't been quite penciled in the budgets yet, that do need to be accounted for.
Yeah, definitely hard to, I guess, have a line on financial projections that says like healing work. um,
Absolutely.
but so I guess, i'm I'm really wondering where, I guess, just as you move forward with the cooperative and growing the cooperative, or maybe not growing the cooperative right now, right? Just getting everything running smoothly before you can even think of taking people on. Is there anything that you would like people to know about that process that you think is really important as people, as we hope that more Black people are looking at the cooperative model and taking on the cooperative model to grow Black businesses?
Yeah, I think that we need to have some more conversations about our values around cooperation, and how do Black people do cooperation. One of the reasons why I decided to make this a national cooperative is because there are a lot of local cooperatives, but I feel like a lot of the problem with the reason why it took so long for Black farmers to even see a modicum of justice in this Pickford versus Glickman thing was because the plaintiffs were isolated to the South, right? And I feel like this division along the Mason-Dixon line needs to go for Black people. I don't feel like, I don't think that it's helping us to go. I think that's a relic from colonialism that separates Black people from in the South from Black people in the North, and particularly farmers. My family had been farming for multiple generations in Southern Iowa and knew nothing about the Pickford versus Glickman thing, and they were absolutely eligible for it. And so I think that that kind of division just it creates further harm, and not only for northern Black farmers who were left out, but also for us to gain momentum
You were talking about they didn't know that they were eligible
Yes,
for, so there needs to be more work done in moving the narrative beyond, moving the narrative beyond just the Black farmers, isolated in the southern areas, and um, incorporating all the Black farmers so that we are having those conversations. We're all aware of what's going on, especially when it's so, like you said, so many of these stories are alike. Doesn't matter where you're at. Doesn't matter if you're in Minnesota or Mississippi. And so how do we connect those narratives so that to help build cooperation?
absolutely. And I think the only thing that I would add is that, being a rural farmer is isolating enough. It's, farmers have higher suicide rates. And being a Black farmer isolated on top of that isolation is really challenging. And it's unnecessary for Black farmers to isolate ourselves from each other because, like you said, what's happening in Minnesota, I was describing today on an earlier call. I was describing my interchange with this USDA representative, and the person on the phone who had been from the South, he said, it sounds like Mississippi.
And I just said Mississippi accidentally. Wow. Wow. I mean, honestly, I'm not even shocked. I'm just not even shocked, especially when you just think about just the policies that have been in place. And even when we talk about like Jim Crow, I think we're all starting to open up to the fact that Jim Crow, laws were not limited to the South. They just looked a little bit different in, northern cities, but it was still intact, in terms of like segregation and all of that stuff that was all those kind of laws and policies that were created to keep Black people down.
Absolutely. And, we internalized a lot of that. And that was one of the things that I noticed doing our conversations when we were fundraising and we were talking to Black professionals in the finance industry. They weren't quite, I felt like they don't have the capacity built yet to do cooperative investment. At least the ones that considered themselves successful and having access to millions of dollars. They may even have some kind of education, but I feel like the cooperative development education and or the cooperative development, the Black cooperation education was something that was sorely missing. And so I know there is an article, and I haven't had a chance to read up on it again, but it was quite a conversation in one of my Black co-op groups where we talked about that question is, are Black cooperatives better than Black capitalism? But I think it's worth, a discussion at least when we're talking about bringing people together on equitable grounds, right? And so sometimes, Black millionaires might feel like they might take on some of that. Uh, I don't know if it's the white savior complex or the complex about their financial ideals being better than the person with the less money, with less financial resources. But there's some kind of way that we have to strike a balance between the access to Black wealth and the understanding of the cooperative model to build Black wealth as a tool to build Black wealth in a more comprehensive way. And I think that we just haven't found, I think that's the conversation that, I'm ready for.
So I guess to wrap it up, and thank you for your time. You mentioned a Black co-op club. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I mean, is that just something you started on your own or something that you were able to tap into?
The book, you said?
I thought you had mentioned a Black cooperative club that you're in.
Oh, yeah. So I do have, well, actually, it's an informal group so far. But I do feel like, I'm really feeling strongly, and maybe this is something that Elizabeth would be looking at too as a part of this kind of series that she's developing, is that we definitely need a think tank type situation going on. And, we have some Black attorneys and maybe investment professional advisors, like Elizabeth in this field, but I think we need to find a way to create more of a leadership, a thought leaders in this area that have influence, like Elizabeth does, that can start to put out some of these messages so that we can, you know, I would consider it upgrading the narrative around Black wealth, because Black wealth just isn't, trips and degrees and LLCs, right? Like, I mean, there's Black wealth in a generational sense, especially if we look at the cooperative model, is really more about lifting as we climb and more about Fannie Lou Hamer and these peoples that had these very strategic economic ideals that didn't get enough momentum behind them. But I think, we're at a time where we can begin to have these conversations now, especially with the rise in Black farmers and with the rise of Black wealth um, and with the rise of the conversation around generational topics, you know, generational wealth, generational trauma. Like, how can we begin to, bring about a better opportunities for the future so that our descendants are not having to go through this stuff. Still, a generation later, I'm still talking about Pigford. These farmers never even got their justice. Most of them died before they saw their payout. And so we can't allow this to go on for another generation. And I think that's where we're going to need some thought leadership, some think tanks, some more financial resources, and people like you and Elizabeth and others who can, help elevate these conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much for your input, because I'm with you. I think we, even in how we move forward, I mean, like you said, why aren't we cooperating to create a think tank to even think about cooperation? And I feel like so much of this is happening. These conversations are happening in like microcosms, or so much of the discussion around cooperatives in general are, from my perspective, being white led. And if we have this rich history of cooperatives, like we say we do, right? Like in terms of the modicums of success, or of that we can point to, like our sheroes, like Fannie Lou Hamer and stuff like that. It's like, how do we become, I guess, leaders for ourselves in terms of the cooperative movement, and educating each other and having these conversations around how do we specifically grow cooperatives that support the Black community and aren't really like a side thought, or aren't just I want to say a branch of the white grown tree. And again, this is no knocking to the allies that are out there or anything like that. It's just more of like, when we talk about autonomy, sovereignty, that really does mean that we have to take things into our own hands, and we can't just take the I don't know what to say, like the byproduct of what is there. But thank you so much, Angela. You were going to say something. I think you're on mute.
Oh, no, you were spot on. I was just going to say it's important, yes, that these conversations are Black led, and that ally support is always welcomed and amazing, but it also is time for especially these Black wealth advocates to really open up their arms to the cooperative movement, right? And to start looking at, and we need to start having these real conversations about Black wealth, and not waiting for the government to initiate it, and not waiting for a white bank to initiate a program, and that we have the ingenuity and the innovation within our own community. We have the wisdom and the ability. It's just that, we have to get the time and the leadership to make it happen.
Amen. Amen. And I definitely think there is that. How do we build more leaders around, I guess, in this topic? And so I definitely commend Elizabeth for what she's trying to do with, around Black women, Lawyers Matter, and preparing Black women to lawyer people who are trying to raise funds, create, build their businesses, scale their businesses, all of the above. And I have to say that, I am one of the beneficiaries of this. And I'm already a lawyer. I'm not even like a law clerk. I've been a lawyer, but it was something that was really important to me, especially because I was really becoming ingrained in the cooperative movement, and wanting to move it forward, and just trying to find my way of how to further ingrain this, because I do believe that our success as Black people is rooted in cooperation. And I think that actually about all people, but especially with us. And yeah, and so I really commend her for doing that. And I could tell you that our training is really interesting, because the first thing she has you do is read excerpts from Collective Courage. So I don't know anybody else who has lawyers or law clerks or anybody saying, okay, training, read Collective Courage.
I love that, because you know what? I use it in my training too. I love that. That's so affirming.
Right? Yes, we're part. This is the leadership that is happening, and we'll figure out a way to just build it, and just building and keep growing. Well, thank you again for your time. I mean, this was such a great talk.
No, I'm excited. I support Elizabeth's work in this area. I mean, I hopefully we can connect some more down the line on, kind of next steps, what might come out of this. But, I think there is, I really wanted to participate in this because I want to make those connections. I want to continue that momentum that y'all are working on. And I want to be a part of, the solution making that we come up with to make some things happen. I've been kind of really considering, and now you're probably like the sixth or seventh Black woman lawyer that I've spoken with about, possibly creating some kind of lawyer support for developing co-ops, because I have a lot of members, and my members all want to start their own little local co-ops in their communities. And, I don't have the ability to provide technical assistance, and I don't really have the skills to do it along the legal lines, but I really feel like that might be, a necessary next step in the next couple of years, is to, find a way to create that infrastructure.
I like that. That's a good plan. This is a great plan. I rubber stamp it.
Awesome.